Hi, we are live today with my friend Jory Micah. Hi, Jory. How are
Hi,
you?
everybody.
I'm so excited to chat with you, but just as a quick introduction for those who are new with the broadcast, we go live every Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific time to chat with women from around the world. And what we do is we just want women to know that no matter where they are, they matter right now in this moment, doing whatever they're doing. They don't have to step out and try to be anything they're not. We matter, we're important, our story matters right now. And today we have Jory Micah. And I'm so excited because we have a similar background. We were just chatting before we went live and kind of laughing about some of our familiar history with college and people we know. And it's so exciting to have you here. Jory, what
Yes.
are you grateful for this morning? Let's
You know
start.
what? I was just thinking, I just got some really hard news. My
Oh,
dad has overcome pancreatic cancer, but they just found some more cancer in his liver,
oh,
and it's supposed to be it's inoperable, and it's supposed to be terminal at this point, and he's only in his 60s. So I guess what I'm grateful for is I live in my hometown right now,
mhm.
and that's always been really difficult for me, even since I was young, because my hometown's boring and small and nothing, I know action happening. But I'm grateful that I'm here during this time because I don't really know how much longer I'll have with my dad, and so I'm happy that I'm in the area, so I can spend possibly his last years with him here. So that's kind of a bummer way to open up, but that's where
No,
I'm at.
I'm sorry to hear that. And actually, I'm really glad that you're here live and just being real. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
the
really
best
sad.
gift that you can give us. Tell us your favorite memory with your dad.
Oh my gosh, there's so many, but he he's just so cool, like fun cool, and he's a musician. So one of my favorite memories that's is that when I was 16, I had a big 16th birthday party, and it was a big dance party. So there was like at least 100 kids there, and my dad sang and 16 candles to me in front of like basically my whole school, and brought out flowers and stuff like that. So he's pretty unique guy.
Oh my gosh, I love that. How has he inspired you to be where you are today?
Oh gosh, he's my number one inspiration, to be honest.
Mhm,
My dad's a minister and a worship leader, and he has always been in the corner of women, even being from the Assemblies of God. We know that in theory, Assemblies of God ordains women, but not
mhm,
always in practice.
mhm,
And my dad has always stuck up for women, even to this day. Like, women will come up to me that are like closer to his age, and they'll say, "Your dad, he was there for me when I was going through my divorce, and everybody was shaming me." And my dad would say, "The heck with that. Get away from these abusive men, or whatever they're doing wrong." But my dad has always been in the corner of women, and he also was very instrumental in helping me to learn egalitarian theology
mm,
um, when I was 18 or so. I had an experience where I called the Bible bullies at school, wanted to basically gang up on me and try to show me different Bible verses of why I'm not called to be a minister as a woman. And I cried my eyes out because I didn't know anything about that then. And my dad, the next week, I was in Texas at the time at Christ for the Nations in Dallas, Texas. And the next week, when I told my dad about this, he sent me a big box of egalitarian theology books.
oh my
So
God.
that was kind of like, my dad has been my inspiration to become a preacher. My dad has been my inspiration um, to be a creative. He's very creative. My parents are both artists and very eccentric.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so he's been my um, my dad and I are also a lot alike in our weaknesses as well. So I've watched him through the years, particularly my dad struggles with depression and anxiety and some things through the years. And I've watched him do that. And I struggle with those things as well. And I've watched the way he's dealt with those things all these years. And man, like that inspires me probably the most out of everything, because I've watched him, God, truly change his life throughout his whole life. Like when he was younger, some of his things that he dealt with came out in really nasty, negative ways because he was really struggling. And I know that now. But like now that he's older, I've watched him grown in patience and in love and in gentleness and in self-control and all the things that are very hard for me and that have been hard for him. He has shown me over the years that there is change with faith, because he's someone that would never take medication or anything. I'm totally different. I will take medication if it helps. But it's also been cool to watch him, though, because he's completely relied on his faith. So when he's struggling, he takes 3 walks a day, or, or he will, lay down 3 times a day and listen to worship music or whatever. Like he continuously strives to become a better man. And it has worked with solely his faith over the years, which has been really, really inspiring to me.
I love this. And I think I want to take this in a little bit different direction, because we're talking about very conservative Christianity here. And we're talking about coming from a place of conservative Christianity and being open and willing to talk about mental health and feminism. Where do you find your place in that? Tell me about that, Jory.
Honestly, that's kind of the 2 stories of my life. So I got saved, and my radical experience with Christ at an Assemblies of God youth conference when I was 13 years old. And that was kind of when my whole entire life shifted. And I always say it's like all the switches that were switched off inside of me were switched on. And when I met Jesus, and all of a sudden, I could see where my gifts were. I could see where my strengths were. And but also at the same time that I was 13, I didn't know this then, but I was struggling with hormonal imbalance, and it was causing migraine headaches. And when you have hormonal imbalance, that can cause mental illness as well. Sometimes hormones can cause worse than anything else if they're out of balance. So that was kind of it's interesting to me is when the same time I gave my life to Christ is when I started kind of really suffering, to be honest. But I was very, very young at the time, and I didn't know a lot of things that, were happening to me. And I think because of my own, I think I had ADHD growing up. And I think because of the stress of all of that. And then, like I said, I had a minister dad who was super charismatic and cool and like larger than life. But and everybody loved him, everybody. And at home, though, he had struggles. And some of his struggles were, like he would just because he would be full of anxiety a lot. And when you're full of anxiety all the time, and then something little would happen, he would just go, and explode. And never ever hurtful towards us or anything like physically hurtful towards us or anything like that. But definitely he would get very angry. And so at a young age, I think I started getting very angry too. And I was dealing with ADHD and things like that. So I was struggling in school and stuff like that. And teachers would misunderstand me a lot. And, I didn't understand a lot of what was happening with me either. And so I started having a lot of anxiety very young. And then by 13, my hormones were completely out of balance. I don't know if that was part of the anxiety growing up, but they were out of balance, and I was getting chronic migraines all the time. And then not only that, but I was very perfectionistic about my faith and my purity and my holiness and all that. I was very perfectionistic about it, to the point where I would give myself anxiety and panic attacks if I didn't feel I was living up to purity culture, or the holiness and perfection of God. I put so much pressure on myself to live up to that. And I think it's because from a very young age, people would put me on a pedestal. And after I gave my life to Christ, like I said, it was like I came alive at that point, and in a lot of ways, even though I was struggling with things. And so a lot of people would put me on a pedestal. And so I tried really hard to live up to people's expectations of me. Whether that was my parents, who were ministers my whole life, or, that was my peers at public school, who saw me as, the leader of the church girls, and I was, and I wasn't like dorky. Like, I had a lot of friends, and I did a lot of things, and people would just constantly, just hold me to a different level, which they still do that, which is why I continuously knock myself off the pedestal in little ways, because I have realized that, between having ADHD growing up, and it was untreated because nobody knew very little about ADHD when I was growing up. They just thought I was super hyper and kind of bratty or whatever. So nobody knew anything about that. And I took on all of those negative reactions. Like, for example, one of my teacher in elementary school told my mom that I wasn't college material in elementary school.
Oh my God.
She said, now Shiloh, my big sister, she'll do fine, but Jory, she's not going to go to college. And now I have a master's degree, so it had nothing to do with my intelligence. It was just a different way of thinking that people didn't understand back then, that caused me a lot of stress and pressure growing up. And then that, along with the chronic migraines, with the mental health issues, with the mental health issues my dad was going throughout my whole life, the perfectionism, the pressure, all of it, it became too much eventually. And that led me to a doctor who prescribed me Vicodin. And I was prescribed like 120 Vicodin pills in my early 20s for chronic headaches and migraines. And at that point, I had not had any kind of mental breakdown or anything yet. And I started taking those pills, and I thought they were an absolute miracle, to be honest. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time in my life that I feel control over everything. I had like these, for some reason, opioids, which is basically like heroin, it made me feel in control of everything for the first time in my life, in control of the perfectionism. Now I could clean my room with these pills, so now I can suppress the pain in my heart from childhood. Now I can go out with my friends late at night and have fun, and come home the next day and not feel like terrible the next morning. These pills just became the answer to everything I ever faced in my life at that point. And that started me on the worst journey of my life, basically, where I not only had to try to overcome all of the things that I told you about at this point, but now I'm addicted to drugs. And it's like, oh my gosh. So it's like this little preacher's girl from the Assemblies of God, who was the leader of the church girls in her private high school, who everybody constantly said, you're going to do great things. You're going to do great things. And now I'm a drug addict, in my, in my mid-20s, and it was like an accident, but it was still what happened. And so now I'm hooked on these pills. And so then I try to get off of these pills, and every single time is like hell, like, because it's like, not only am I having all the withdrawal symptoms, but everything I told you about that I've been struggling with since early childhood would come up with a vengeance. And not only that, but the headaches and the migraines would come up with a vengeance. So every time I tried to get off of them, it was just this vicious cycle. And that led me down a road of extreme depression and extreme anxiety. And in 2019, I finally was able to get off of the opioids. It took probably 10 different times throughout 10 years of trying. And I was finally able to get off of, mostly because they developed a new migraine medication that actually worked. So, when I went to get off of it, I could deal with all the mental and emotional anguish a little better, because the physical side effects of withdrawal were the withdrawal migraine, they call it. It was better at that point, and so I could focus on those things. But since January of 2019, I have just stopped dead in my tracks, pretty much, and just been like, all right, God, like, I'm gonna stop trying to be perfect. I'm gonna stop trying to act like I have it all together. I'm gonna stop trying to act like I don't have struggles. I'm going to stop trying to act perfect. I'm going to just be honest with how I really feel and think and what I'm going through, and let the chips fall where they may. And it's been a really difficult time in the last couple years, because it's very difficult for me to sit still and heal, and really heal, and do the work to heal, because I'd much rather be out there speaking or preaching or writing, or a lot of times when I would take opioids, it wasn't to go party, it was to write a 10-page paper. So it's like my addiction issues were very much correlated with my perfectionistic issues. So it all kind of goes together. And the oppression that I felt, one of the biggest reasons addiction issues get worse is because communities don't have jobs, or don't have purpose, and don't have the accountability that comes from a community. You find yourself in isolation. So that's also a part of the story of, feeling excluded and oppressed from the white evangelical church, and not really ever being able to get out of this cycle. Because how could I ever go to the church and say, I'm a minister, but I have drug addiction problems? Like, that just wasn't, that authenticity's just never been allowed. And so I never could do that. I always felt like I had to hide my struggles. So it also correlates to not being able to find work as a woman preacher, and feeling like, oh my gosh, like, I went to all this training and seminary and all these things, and now I can't find a job, in what I went to school for. So you can see how, if someone's already struggling with mental illness and addiction and learning disabilities and all these things, and their own upbringing and all that, how it can translate to just a snowball effect. So I guess my mission, is to find a way to correlate all of those things for women and men that are struggling with these things. And it doesn't have to be drug addiction. It can be any addiction. What you go to try to control your surroundings and your weaknesses and your struggles and whatever in your life. It doesn't have to, for me, it was prescription drugs, but for someone else, it might be eating habits, for someone else, it might be, whatever, it can be alcohol. It can be shopping, it could be, just being fake about your life, hiding behind all your things and stuff like that. So that's kind of the message that I'm trying to preach with my life, I guess you could say.
Have you found it to be refreshing to be more vulnerable and to be like, this is who I am. This is who God made me to be. And this is my story. Have you found?
Definitely.
And vulnerability. And what does that look like?
Definitely. That's something that God has shown me from the very beginning, is that when I started trying to conquer some of these issues, there were things that God showed me that I took to heart. One of them was to be honest, to be human. And then the other one might come back to me. To be humble. And those were like the 3 H's that God showed me, is that, you are a human, you came here to be human. Sometimes some people think that we chose to come to earth before, which is a weird thought, who knows, but, if we did, whether we did or not, I feel like in my life, God has shown me that no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, that you're going to have struggles, in this life, that this life is almost part of the purpose of this life is to overcome struggles. So, I came into this earth with tremendous parents, tremendous parents, but they had very dysfunctional upbringings, especially my dad. My dad came from parents who would throw knives at each other when he was a little boy. He says his mom, this is kind of funny, but he said his mom one time was laying on the ground acting like she was dead. And she looked up at him as a little boy and winked at him because she was playing a game. And that's the kind of upbringing he came up. So by the time he had kids, he had PTSD, and so I feel like, we come into this world, not just to become these famous preachers and to famous worship leaders and all these things that the white evangelical church has come to be. But we come in to face the struggles of our family and our and whatever, not just what they brought onto us with their decisions, but their brain chemistry even. Like we come into this world with the genetics of things that are messed up. And it doesn't matter how awesome your Christian minister parents were. Like that was a big hurdle for me. And that's why I keep bringing it up, because I had such good parents. Like it's hard. It's very difficult to confront the things your parents, may have not gotten right or may have messed up on, when you honor them and you love them so, so much. And, and you can just see, all the things they did for your life that you're so grateful for. But I think that's the beginning of healing, is like when a family can come together and say, we're not perfect. We have some pretty messed up things in our family, but we can overcome these things so that if and when Luke and I have children, the genetics will be maybe a little better, because I believe that. I believe we are physically fixing our genetics, like not just, and that's a weird thing to say, but I believe the mind can change. and it can, and there can be redemption in the area of the mind. And so that's kind of what God has shown me, is that you came into this world to help your family and to help those around you overcome these certain struggles, and that God's not judging me for those struggles, and that he's never judged me for those struggles, that God knew that that was part of why I would come here, and what the purpose of it all is. Does that make sense?
Oh, girl, you're preaching a story I understand. I mean, let's talk about this, because you're very vocal about mental health and ADHD and feminism. And you're very vocal, willing to step into a place that it hasn't been popular. And so hearing your story, I want to ask, what gives you strength in doing that? Have you lost your voice? And what gives you the strength to actually maintain the story that you're telling, very much so online?
Yeah. Honestly, my faith, my faith has always been my strength. It's always been my confidence. It's always been my identity. When I lose touch with that faith is when I struggle the most, and so, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't been times where my faith was fine and I still was struggling, so I'm not saying that, if you just have more faith, you wouldn't struggle so much, because that's not my story. I still struggled a lot, but I would hold on to that little bit of faith, even if it's as tiny as a mustard seed. There have been times that I've been so sick, and in so much pain that I just couldn't do anything anymore but fall to my knees and be like, God, I am completely on the ground and broken here, and I don't know what else to do but this. So I really do 100% give credit to God to just continuously reminding me that even in the face of so much darkness and evil inside of me and outside of me, that God is bigger, and that God is stronger, and that, again, purpose too. The fact that I believe that I have a purpose to overcome and to transcend some of these really major issues, because if I can transcend these issues, then anyone can, to be honest, so my heart in life is to find the greatest level of freedom and liberation as possible. And while I'm kind of throwing off these chains and getting out of these traps and all that, my hope and my prayer and my belief is that people are behind me following, and they're also getting free as I get free. So that's kind of what motivates me to keep going.
Okay, Jory, I want to ask you a big question, because this is something I talk about a lot with a lot of people, and it's something that is just so close to my heart. What does freedom look like to you?
I think it looks like security, peace. I think it's difficult to have freedom when you feel very insecure. And so I think that brings us to like another subject that's a good example. I just watched a video of a person that doesn't believe in wearing a mask in the pandemic, crying out for freedom from what he believes to be tyranny. But for me, I actually feel the opposite. I feel like it makes me feel less free that there are not people that are willing to follow the guidance to get us through this pandemic. Because how can we be free until we are out of quarantine? you know? So I feel like liberation and freedom always has boundaries. And so it's figuring out, I think, what those boundaries are compared to what we have been taught they are. Because the things we've been taught they are, a lot of times are just religion and man-made ideas. So what is actual freedom? Yes, I think that there are boundaries within freedom and liberation. But those boundaries cause security, not insecurity. So I think that feeling secure, you know, whether that's mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, in any way, feeling secure. That's why I advocate on behalf of, that's why I get involved in politics. I don't even care that much about like any of these politicians. Like I care about that the poor is taken care of and the single mom is taken care of, because I believe that provides humanity with more freedom. The more we are feeling secure, the more free we can be to run after whatever dreams you have in your heart. And I think that is the ultimate level of freedom on this earth, is to get to a point where you are so secure, starting within yourself and within Christ, really. But when that starts to overflow to security in your whole life, and you're able to, oh my gosh, like I am healed, I am stable, like I am balanced, I am, I am connected, I am all these things. I have nothing left to think about except my dreams and what God has put in my heart to come here to do. So that's my ultimate. I think it's very difficult to dream when you're stressed out about how you're going to pay your bills, when you're stressed out where your next fix will come from, when you're stressed out about should I or should I not go to church right now? Like those are all like stresses that are real in our lives right now. And it's very difficult for us to sit back and to just dream and to get in touch with our intuition and who we truly are in the inside. And I think that is where liberation comes. And it's not something that I think it's something that we experience enough. We get tastes of it. And so it makes us want higher levels of it, and higher levels of it, and higher levels of it. I don't think there's ever going to be a point, though, in this side of Earth where we're 100% liberated. But I do think that's exactly what we are working towards, as we grow and change. And the more we seek to find that, the more we will be, I don't know. I guess this is a lack of a better language, but more comfortable in heaven, because we're closer to the character of Christ the more we work on those things, in my point of view.
What we haven't touched on this yet, and I want to get to this because we talked about feminism, and that's a big topic for you. So I do want to ask you, what does feminism look like to you?
Well, I think it looks like, just to come back to this freedom and liberation, it's all about, I think the reason that my life there's such an imprint of liberation, and I'm like obsessed with freedom and liberation, is because I know what it feels like to feel trapped, to feel, less than, to feel unequal, to feel inferior, to feel powerless, to feel the opposite of imprisoned and enslaved spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, in every way you can possibly imagine. I know what it feels like to feel like a prison to your own self, a prisoner to your own self, I should say, and to the world around you. And so, in my experience, I feel that if I would have been in a denomination that, I could have worked towards something, where I could have been included and treated the same as my male peers that graduated from Bible school and seminary. For example, like I feel like I could have more easily worked through some of these issues because I think a lot, and I think it was all God's will. Now that I'm looking back on it, I'm comfortable with what happened, but I really do feel like, if you look around the country and the worst places that are struggling with the opioid epidemic, it's in the areas that there are lack of equality with job opportunities. Jobs are very important to men and women, whether that's even if your job is staying at home, taking care of your kids, we all need a job. And somehow I fell completely through that crack, where not only did I never have kids yet, so I don't have that purpose as a woman, but I fell completely through the crack of having, being able to really find work as a woman in ministry. So I feel that equality is not that women and women are exactly the same. We're not, but that we are deserving of the exact same opportunities to thrive in this world and in the church. And when we don't get those opportunities to grow and to thrive and to climb, whatever ladder you're trying to climb, we fall through the cracks and we become marginalized, we become oppressed, and we become sick. So that's kind of really the whole gist of why I believe in feminism, why I believe in lifting women up as equals to men. Because if we don't, we're allowing women to fall through. Women who were the church girls of their high school, who have seminary degrees, whose parents are ministers, women who have gifts that far exceed many of the men's gifts that are in the places of pastors and, leaders in the church. So we are marginalizing a generation of women who they let us go to seminary, but then they didn't help us get jobs after we graduate seminary, which is kind of cruel, because it's like, it would have been better for us to just be honest and say, women, you should just go get like a teaching degree or something, or social work degree or whatever, but when you graduate, we're still going to prefer to hire men over women. And so it's not just me that has fallen through this cracks. It's an entire generation of women. That's why the things I say are popular, because it's relatable. It's a generation that is falling, that women that are just leaving the church in droves too, finding a different place to use their gifts. And some women who are not, don't even believe in God or Christ anymore, because they've been so wounded by the church, excluding and marginalizing and oppressing with the system. And it's not all the people. Some of the people are wonderful people that are egalitarian, but even if you have an egalitarian elder, for example, at a church, he's still going to be outnumbered by the system, because the system's going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So, my goal is to break down that system and to be part of a generation of men and women who will rebuild a system that is more inclusive and less self-centered. Less about, I think a big problem in white evangelicalism is that we have turned our ministers into celebrities. And so now, that we've got these people that are just like millions of followers, that are leading us to believe that that's what ministry looks like. And that's we were brought, I feel like, especially in Assemblies of God, like we were brought up like to believe that we are all supposed to become famous ministers to some regard, and when that doesn't happen, and not only that doesn't happen, but the opposite happens, where you can't even get a regular job in ministry at a local church. When that happens, it's such a disillusionment, and it takes, I feel, if you grew up in that, it's taken me years of healing and understanding that that's not ministry, and that we need to pull some of these celebrities back down to the ground and say, and that the way you do that is by saying, I'm not going to participate in this anymore. I'm not going to go to these big concerts with this, one woman that happened to make it through this system that's preaching and leading and stuff, when there are hundreds and thousands of women who are, the opposite of that. Like they can't even get a job at for $12 an hour at a local church, like, so it's really frustrating, and it hurts a lot sometimes to even watch like the big ministers and worship leaders, like, because most of them are silent about this issue, and most of them are silent about all issues that would be considered controversial. But it's really frustrating, because some of these people I've known, some of these people I went to school with, some of these people I have relationships with, and I'm just like, it's very hard, because it's like I love them, but I have to like continuously say, but I don't judge them, because if I were them, I'd probably do the same thing. If I had this free ride all the way to the top, who wouldn't take that? So I don't judge them, but I do get frustrated with them for not using their privilege and their power to fight for the marginalized and the oppressed. And some of them may not know, how marginalized and oppressed women are in the white evangelical church, and in the church in general, and in the world in general. If you become like a trophy and a trophy woman that made it, you are the rare gem. Like, you are not the, you're the exception to the rule. The rule is that most women are, if they even get to pastor a church at all, they're usually given a small church, a troubled church. It's a very messed up system. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, where I come in, where my feminism comes in.
I have so many questions I want to ask you about that, but we're running out of time. I have so many questions I want to go back to about that specifically, and white evangelicalism, and girl, the Assemblies of God that I know you love them because that's your family.
Yeah.
And I want to ask because I feel it so much too. Do we have a voice as women in denominations like the Assemblies of God, or do we find a new place outside the Assemblies of God and use our voice there, knowing that we have hope for everybody? We want to see everyone equal.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, my honest answer is no, we don't. And that's because that's the real life, my real life experience.
Yeah.
And again, there will always be your exceptions. So the only way you can have a voice in the white evangelical system, whether it's Assemblies of God or Baptists or whatever, is if you are willing to give in to the system.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to cooperate with the system, you might be able to get a voice. But if you do that, you're hurting your sisters in Christ who have said, I have left this system specifically because I've realized that you can't fight a system from the inside as a woman.
Yeah.
Unless you have a lot of power, like Beth
Mhm.
Moore, for example, like she's someone who seems to be able to fight the system from the inside. But will there come a day where she can no longer do that? There might,
Yeah.
So there are people that have a lot of power and privilege within the system that you might be able to make a difference. But if you're just a regular woman in ministry, and even if you have a seminary degree,
Mhm.
my belief is that there, in the Assemblies of God in particular, they will ordain women in theory, but
Mhm.
when it comes to actually hiring women, if a man applies and he's, almost just as good as the woman,
Mhm.
the man's probably going to get hired.
Yeah.
And that's because there's a system of hierarchy.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, if you have power within a system, another person that, I feel works well within the system is Pastor Tara Beth Leach. I
Mhm.
don't know if you know her, but she's a big pastor. She's leaving the position now because her dad has cancer as well, and she's moving home. But she was the first woman pastor at a huge Nazarene
Mhm.
evangelical church. And it's
Mhm.
really funny because it's like, if you go to her church, it's like
Mhm.
all these like old white guys, pictures of
Mhm.
all, because it was like the first Nazarene church of that area in California. And
Mhm.
so it's like 30 pictures of white men, old
Yeah.
white men, and then Tara Beth, who's like my age and young,
Mhm.
So there are exceptions, and she fights against the system within the system. So
Mhm.
there are exceptions, but she had a lot of power and privilege in that position. So I don't want to say that in every case that you can't fight the system from within, because I think you can, but it's definitely not the norm. And I would
Mhm.
say if you are a woman minister, and you're a woman that's graduated seminary, from a white evangelical institution, I would highly recommend that you start writing books, that you
Mhm.
maybe start up a podcast like you're doing,
Mhm.
um, that you would do your own thing, build your own
Mhm.
table, start,
Yeah.
create conferences once this pandemic is over,
Yeah.
create spiritual retreats, start your own nonprofits, start your own church. You
Mhm.
don't need to be ordained or any of that by anyone to do your own thing. If you have the leadership gifts, um, just do it and connect with other women that are
Mhm.
also doing it, because I think that's how we're going to eventually break down the system. It's by
Mhm.
just offering something new so that
Mhm.
people can say, oh, okay, I'm going to leave that system and I'm going to go over here because this is actually where I'm getting fed as a woman.
Yeah.
And this is where I'm actually feeling alive again. And my
Mhm.
faith is being rejuvenated. And as leaders, as
Mhm.
we do what we're doing, like our faith is being rejuvenated right now.
Mhm.
Your
Yeah.
faith is being rejuvenated, just by us connecting and exchanging ideas and things of that nature. So I really would say, if you're a woman, if you're a woman in ministry and you don't have the connections, start making your own connections,
Mhm.
start writing now. You will have to, if you want to be a speaker, you need to write a book. I learned that early on.
Mhm.
I've gotten some speaking opportunities without a book, but very little compared to the people that have actually gotten a book out there and
Mhm.
written. So I would say focus on looking for the back doors, in
Mhm.
this world, because there are back doors to make it in your own way, in your own creative way. You can make it and
Mhm.
you will make it. And I'm talking to someone right now that
Mhm.
doesn't believe that they will make it in this time
Mhm.
because they're going through so much, but you will make it. You will and you can, and that's what you're here to do. You're here to struggle. You're here. And the struggle is the story that you get out of for example, my book that I'm writing right now, which is called Breaking the Glass Steeple. It's a memoir. It's the struggle of my life, but it's also the strengths. It's also, the redemption. And that's really what makes a beautiful story, is when we're able to say, hey, these are my honest struggles, and I'm human. But I believe in redemption. I believe that I will be born again over and over again in this lifetime. I feel.
I always ask at the end of this program for women to give a message to women, but I think I'm going to change the question for you a little bit.
Sure.
So, Jory, dream over woman for us right now. What is your dream for women? Speak directly to every woman watching right now. What is your dream for every one of us?
My dream for women is that we would stop striving to be the perfect Christians and perfect pure and perfect holy and all that, and that we would actually start striving for healing and authenticity. Because I feel that as a person who strived for purity and holiness, and to the point where, in my early 20s, I even wrote a book called Fighting for Purity. So I have been there. I have fought for those things with all my heart. But what God has shown me is that a lot of those things are just man-made anyway. And that if I truly want to be happy and liberated and at peace and in my best self in this world, that I actually have to let go of those things. I have to actually let go of control. And I have to let go of the idea of ever even being close to perfect. I have to let go of the pedestal. I like the pedestal. The pedestal's nice, but it's not nice when you fall down, as soon as someone notices, oh, that person on that pedestal, they got some issues, now you feel more shame than you would have felt if you were just not on the pedestal at all. So, knock yourself off that pedestal, and keep humble and dedicate your life to finding you, to finding truly you on the inside. And you're not going to find that on the outside at all. You're going to find that by getting still and listening to who you are, listening to what's going on inside of you and who you are and your most authentic self, to fight for that. I feel that is a real spiritual principle, to be able to find your most authentic self in this life, versus trying to be perfect based off other people's religious point of views, and trying to be pure based off what other people think is purity, and trying to control everything around you all the time, and not being able to let go. Those are all things I've continuously struggled with in my life. And I believe that my dream for women is that we can start to just shed off chains, shed off the chains of anxiety and depression and fear and perfectionism and addiction and whatever the issues are. However you deal with your pain is different than however I deal with my pain. But I feel that if we can come together and start to connect and start to build something where women feel safe and loved and accepted, their authentic selves accepted, where you can come here and you don't have to pretend. If you struggle with drinking every night of the week, you can come here and you can tell us about it, and we're not going to judge you, because we have our own struggles, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like my struggles, are better than yours somehow, and vice versa. Like we all have our own struggles. So my dream is that we can create an environment for women where they can see how unique they are, how special they are, how loved and accepted they are unconditionally. Because I believe that we can't really love unconditionally until we learn to love ourselves unconditionally. I believe we can only love to the degree that we love ourselves. And I think patriarchy sometimes unintentionally teaches us to hate ourselves, teaches us to be ashamed of ourselves, teaches us to be silent and small and don't ruffle any feathers, just don't you dare say who you really are, because that could upset someone or whatever. My dream is that we could be 100% authentic with each other, and that we could grow out of that. Because how can you even begin to know what your gifts are and your passions are in life if you're not being authentic with yourself in the first place? Because you grew up in all this religion, so it's my prayer, man, that we just shake off all that religious crap, just shake it off and shake off all this feelings, this number one feeling of you're not good enough as you are.
Yeah.
That's patriarchy right there.
Yeah.
You're not good enough as you are. And my dream for women is that we start to realize, actually, I'm just right as I am, and I'm actually, God is really proud of me. Actually, God is really, really into me. Like, actually, like, I believe that God has a really unique, special purpose for me specifically. And it's not born out of insecurity anymore when you're being authentic. Because when it's born out of insecurity, it's like, I'm special, and I felt that way for a long time in my life. And when it's born out of real authenticity, and real security in who you really are, you start to realize, wow, like everybody is unique and special to God, but I am specifically special to God in certain ways. And that's because God gets a kick out of me, and I think, and I'm not only the apple of his eye, but all the weird, quirky things I do in my life, like God likes me. And I think that's my dream, that we come to a place where, and then to take that one step further, my second dream is that once we as women find that place in our hearts, that we would become so generous towards at-risk and poor women in our society, that we would start really pouring out and lifting up the most marginalized, poor, and at-risk women in our society. That because it's not enough just to change. If you change and you don't start to do anything with that, it doesn't mean as much. But if you change and then you're like, man, I am ready, I'm activated, I pray that we stop giving our attention so much to famous Christians and everything that they're saying and doing, and all the gossip of Christian land, but we stop giving your money to churches that are still operating in the system that's hurting you. Start giving your money to the poor, to the marginalized, to social networks that you trust, that are really, really helping women. If you really care about this issue, put your money into the most marginalized, at-risk women that exist, instead of into the patriarchal system. Forget about all the tithing. I know that that's going to freak a lot of Assemblies of God people out, but there's a lot of scripture out there that we need to question. And there are a lot of books out there that that don't believe in 10% tithing at all, because we're new covenant Christians, and that's in the Old Testament. So forget about tithing, forget about all that. God says he wants a joyful, cheerful giver. So find, if this is your heart issue, give your money to women in ministries and leaders who are actually doing the work down in the dirt. They're actually down in the dirt doing the work, because I that's how women, and another, I'll end with this, but another cool thing about Jesus' ministry is that it was basically bankrolled by women.
It was.
Yeah.
And that's such a powerful message that people don't realize.
Yeah.
Such a powerful message. And who was funding it, Jory?
Who was funding what do you mean?
Who was funding Jesus, his ministry?
Lydia was one of them. Lydia, because she was very wealthy. She made purple dye. She dyed things purple, and back then purple was the color of royalty, and so it was very expensive. Whatever she was a businesswoman, and so whatever she sold, she made good money, and so she was one of them. Who else? I can't remember now.
Well, I think I might get this wrong, but I feel like someone in Herod's household was also funding Jesus, which makes the story really interesting. And I'm going to have to go back and look on that. But someone in his household, I don't know if it was his wife or daughter or something like that, was a big follower of Jesus, actually, and helping fund him. And so there's a weird irony there. And so
there is a weird irony there.
Don't take my word on this, but there's a weird irony there that I've studied. And so, but the people who were funding Jesus were, I believe it was primarily women.
Yeah, it was. And that was, I think that's where we're coming back to. I think everything's falling, where the systems are collapsing. We're in a moment of collapse. And we have an opportunity to look back on the early church here and to say, okay, what did they do? Were they on TV asking for your 10% tithe? No. Where they didn't do that. Like they supported the ministries that they were truly believed were helping the poor and the marginalized, the poorest, because this is how I feel. I feel that if we dedicate our lives to helping the least of these, whether that's people who are poor, people that are minorities and that are oppressed by police or by the system or whatever, if we dedicate our lives to helping the least of these, then we change the system. And we become, as we change the system, we empower ourselves. Because hey, if people listen to that person on the street, and stick up for that person on the street who has absolutely nothing and that's been oppressed and marginalized for forever, maybe they'll listen to me, and it's not why you do it, but you keep it in mind, that when you empower the least of these, you always empower yourself too, always.
It's so true. I heard someone say that you're only as free as the most oppressed amongst you.
Exactly. Believe that. I believe that with all my heart. And that's a big reason I follow a lot of Black women who have taught me that, to be honest. With Black women in American culture are some of the most marginalized and, oppressed people in our culture. And I've learned from Black women who are leaders now, that will say, if we empower Black women, we empower everyone. Because if this society will start listening to Black women, the system has flipped. So that's why I spend a lot of time empowering the voices of Black women as well, and women of color in general.
Who should we be reading right now?
Well, I would say I picked out some of the books I really like here, so I'll show you these. This book is by my friend Carlos Rodriguez. It's called Drop the Stones. Okay. Do you know Carlos?
I don't know him personally, but I follow him very closely. I love his voice. Absolutely.
So he actually, I should have found it before, but he actually quoted me in this book. So I'm giving him a shout out here. And then this book is so good for women who are like, man, I don't fit in with like the light pink women crowd. This was written by my friend Jackie Rose, who went to a very conservative seminary and has been working pretty much with a lot of conservatives in Texas. So she wrote this book called Lime Green to demonstrate, that she was not like the light pink Texas women, that she was different, that she was a different color than them. And she talks about her ministry experience and some feminist theology as well. This is from my friend Amber Picada. She wrote this a while ago. It's called God's Feminist Movement. And she talks about her story. This is a great book if you really want to dive into more of the theology and less of the memoirs. This is called Half the Church by Carolyn Custis James. Okay. And I think this is, if you're only going to read one book, read this one. And then if you're looking for a cool devotional during this time of quarantine, this is the coolest devotional I've ever had. Have you heard of this?
No.
100 Days in the Secret Place.
Written. Who wrote it?
Well, it's written. It's actually compiled by this Gene Edwards, but it's not his work. It's your old spiritual what mystics. That's what I'm looking for. Yes. It's your old spiritual mystics, including I'm gonna say her name wrong, but I'm gonna say it anyway because everybody loves her. What is it? What do I say? Guyon? What is her first name? Hold on. People will know who I'm talking about when I find her. Whatever. Point is that this is a great book for just a daily devotional. And if you want to read that, it's by mostly just compiled the best old mystic theologians. And then let's see who else. I think I'll stick with that. There are so many other ones. These are just books that I pulled off my shelf. Yeah. But there are so many other people. Bree Newsom, I follow her on Twitter. I don't think she's written a book, but she's a Christian. She's the woman who climbed the flagpole to take down the Confederate flag. She scaled up the pole, and she held up the flag. And she said something to the extent of, I come in the power of the name of Jesus, and I demand this flag come down. So she is one of the most powerful Black women I follow. Her name's Bree Newsom. I follow her on Twitter. And she incorporates her faith in Christ with her being an activist for Black Lives Matter. So I would definitely recommend her too. And a lot of people like Austin Channing too. She wrote a book called I'm Still Here. And so that's about, the Black struggle in America as a Christian as well. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm gonna put all of these books and all the book recommendations in the comments after the show. Where can we find you, Jory?
You can find me at jorymicah.com, and all of my social media is on that website. So I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. I have a couple speaking engagements that are on YouTube as well, if you want to watch those.
I'll put that up at the end of the show. Jory, this has been powerful, phenomenal. You spoke directly to me, not even knowing any of my story. Awesome. I can relate. I know a lot of people listening can relate. We had James Prescott saying, I completely relate to you, Jory. We had Jenny Osborne and my friend Marie and James Valentine and a whole bunch of friends watching.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Yeah, they all commented. You couldn't see it because I know you can't see from there, but Thank you, everyone, for watching. Your voice matters. Woman, we matter. We're valuable. We are important where we are right now. Jory spoke so powerfully into each of us, dreamed over us. Thank you, Jory.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you next Monday. Bye-bye.
Thank you.